You raise a really interesting and important question, Theo. And my answer to that would be I had this wonderful job for a charity in Southwest London. And there were- and I was working with families then. And what I realized cross cultural, cross class, there were a high number or perceivingly high number of children with neurodiverse challenges and parents not able to support their children. Now, I will name the charity, the organisation, because they were a council because it was fantastic. So it was Achieving for Children, and what they did is they organised sort of parenting workshops specifically to support parents with challenging young children. And in most cases, these children had either sort of ADHD, ASD, and other sort of challenges there. So it was about teaching them how to respond to the child's behaviour, because you had parents been working, and again they were directors, some teachers, head teachers, and when they got home it's just a huge intense pressure because this individual child was being very challenging, and you can lose it, you can get angry. So it's important to seek help from professional organisations that can begin to work with the child but also work with the parents, because we all get triggered, and how we've been parenting when we were younger, unless we've done some self development, we do the same thing. Now, some cultures could be more disciplined. Some parents can allow the child to do whatever they believe they need to do because it'd be okay, but it's no. So the challenges would be to get support, see a therapist, work with the school to say you're having sort of challenges. However, in most cases, the children who have or act out at home, when they go to school, they seem to behave well. So you have the parents going to school and saying, my child's doing X, Y, and Z. And the teachers say, your child's wonderfully well. They're fantastic. And you're looking, thinking, am I going crazy? So this is the message I got from many, many parents. But what happens? The child wants to be seen as good. So they're holding all the feelings, the anxieties, the ones that can, and they hold it, hold it, hold it. Then, soon as that child leaves the classroom, you can begin to see that challenging behavior. And then when they get home, it's like they unleash the full pent up feelings of anger and anxiety. And the parents are like, oh my God, what can I do? Uh, Also, we're looking at sleeping issues. There's a sense of anxiety, fear, they're not able to sleep. There's children, have intrusive thoughts, children that just blurt out with things. So there's so much going on for that young child. How can they cope? How can the parents cope? Because they're not used to seeing that or experiencing that type of behavior, but also it's not out there. So these parents are going through and think it's my child, I'm a bad parent, when in fact there's not enough information to support parents about the increase of people with neurodiverse challenges. But what I'm also seeing is older people with neurodiverse challenges or being diagnosed late, like myself, um, realizing that I've gone through all these challenges, and I wish someone had said, "Look, I think you may need to see someone because this is what I'm observing in you." So I think what it does again affects self-esteem, it affects confidence. Am I stupid? Why can't I do X, Y, and Z? So that's an adult saying this. So I need support. Can you imagine what a child's going through? So I think again, it can relate to having money. If you have a good source of income, you can get the support um, because you have the money. If you haven't, then that's going to be a real challenge. But again, I think it's about talking to people, finding out more information. And there are sort of parenting groups out there, which I can't name for now, where people are beginning to sort of talk together and realizing it's not just me, I'm not a bad parent, it's not just my child. So again, it's about googling information. There's the ADHD and autism societies. So it's slowly emerging. But again, we need to talk to each other. We need to make it an everyday occurrence where we reach out, we ask for support. I don't know if that answered your question.
Yeah, that's brilliant. The thing that just really hit me quite hard then is just in the last couple of weeks, one of my children, who's 8, as I've spent 1 to 2 hours every single night to get them to sleep, and for the first time in 8 years, they've it's still an hour, but they're able for the first time to switch off themselves, which is I can't tell you what kind of an emotional, incredible experience that is. One, because it can be hard work before, but two, because the moment it's happened, you start to see the benefits of what was a lot of hard work, but maybe that you've been able to help the transition in a way that has helped their equilibrium, right? Has not forced them to, I don't know, just try to go on sleep on their own 3 years ago and they just lie there on their own for hours. I don't know, and we all have to make different decisions, but that hit me personally because as a parent, I'm feeling that and understanding that just in that micro element of our lives, right? And if we put that in the context of, okay, we may have somebody who's dealing with a child who's going through all those emotional challenges as being neurodiverse, but then the adult themselves may have only just realized they're neurodiverse in a workplace that may or may not be helpful to them, right? So do they need to go and get the same type of help, but for adults as that you would be exploring with the children, or do they look for a different route for support?
That's I'll start with the first. It's a huge question, and it's an important question again. When we look at sleep with children, we look at anxiety. There's a fear there of something, and again, we can go back to trauma, birth. Trauma at birth, the birthing process, and when I ask parents about children, their child or their child's there, I always ask about the parents' history because you need to understand what's going to be played through or possibly reenacted. Now, we look at a mother being anxious, there's anxiety there, and there's anxiety around the birth or something's happened. The child is also picking on to that anxiety. So, what we call preverbal trauma, there's something happening for the child which they're not able to articulate. So, for example, anxiety, there's 7 to 9 types of cries. I think there's 9. So, if I'm hungry, if I'm in pain, if I need attention, if my stomach's not well, I sense I'm scared. So, I need my nappy changing. So, they're all cries that a baby sends out, and the mother or father intuitively picks up on those. Now, if we look at anxiety and it's not picked up on, then what happens is the baby's building onto something of their needs not being met. So they sort of lose a sense of trust what's going on into the world. That could affect the sleeping. However, if we look at ADHD or ASD, we know there's a sense of intrusive thoughts, hypersensitivity around that child, or the child picking up on different energies, as in sensitivity around the house. So that's something you have to work with. But what I sort of heard from you, which is wonderful, is you mirror how to be with the child. So in most cases, if we look at children that seem quite intelligent, parents see that child as maybe someone very intelligent, but they forget emotionally where that child is. And that can sort of bring up lots of frustration. You're saying X, Y, and Z, you're speaking like an adult, but now you're behaving very young. They forget that. So what happens is with the fear that they have, what you've been doing is mirroring. So I was working with a 16-year-old, 15 to 16 last year, who was later diagnosed with ASD and more than likely having ADHD. And I did 8 sessions of, no, I did 10 sessions of CBT, but I used guided visualization in there as well, lots of movement. What the mother and father did, which appears you're doing the same thing with your daughter, was they were asking the child, what do you need? Or looking at coping strategies that the child can naturally use. So this child didn't get diagnosed, he was 16, with ASD because the parents were using wonderful interventions, being with them, seeing if they're okay. Then all of a sudden, the child began to use these coping strategies. So it came to a point at 16, they realized something wasn't quite right. So again, when we look at children, they learn from us. So the mirroring and parents being able to respond, are you feeling scared? What's going on in your mind? All these things that parent says allows the child the space to see what's going on. Is it my feelings? Am I scared? So what you're doing is allowing your you said your daughter, yeah? Was it your daughter? Yeah. Allowing them
Yes.
all of a sudden to become at ease because you're respecting where she is in that moment. So she's also beginning to build up resilience, how to sort of nurture herself or allow herself to go to sleep. But it takes practice, it's repetition. Repetition, repetition, repetition. And all of a sudden your child will be doing what you do or what you say, as you know. So I think that's really, really important. Going back to the workplace again, after the age of 7, 8, what tends to happen, lots of things become repressed or suppressed. So the child begins to identify with the world because this is how the world works. So these old traumas of sort of, in theory, they go away, but they're still there, and you become part of the world. Or again, your dreams or aspirations could be faded away, lost. So you become part of the world and you do as the world says. So the child, going back to what I mentioned earlier in school, will try to become part of the system, and I have to behave myself. So I can't show who I am, my emotions or feelings in most cases. So therefore, this way of being connected, I have to behave like X, Y, and Z, becomes imprinted on the child. When we look at the sort of puberty stage, what normally happens unconsciously is all the suppressed and repressed emotions starts emerging. So all of a sudden, you get the child maybe acting out. I don't want to do this. I don't want to listen. You say black, they say it's white. Yeah. You say it's red, it's yellow. It's a normal function of the brain. But again, parents don't realize that. Or all of a sudden, you see the child that wants to be an adult, then all of a sudden they go back, they want to hug, they want to be next to mummy or daddy because the brain is growing. The brain that we have, which says a neuroplasticity, going back about repetition, we keep learning. So what happens is all this old memories start moving forward within the brain, things that haven't been sort of processed by the child. So it's actually a wonderful time to work through those early traumas or experiences and change the narrative. Because if we keep those old memories there, they form this huge way of being which can't be changed. Whereas if you're the parent that's open to your child, not talk about being perfect, but allowing them the space to be within a certain framework, then what happens? They begin to build up new neural pathways in the brain, and so those old behaviours can begin to sort of die, and the new behaviour is becoming built. So again, when we look at neurodiversity or in the workplace, we're looking at letting go of something old and creating a new way of being. So it's more sort of having a growth mindset. So now I'm going really fast there, aren't I? Sorry.
I'm enjoying it. Carry on.
So we're looking at many things at that period where a child could be healed and sort of giving them a new platform to do something different, which I think is really, really important. It can be challenging for them because they don't know what's going on from the past. But as long as we're just with them and giving them the space and trust them, in most cases, I think they will tend to be okay. It's only when there's old memories or traumas or maybe not being able to identify why they're different will add to that trauma or their challenging behavior. When we go to the back to the sort of workplace again, if this place hasn't been worked through, we can look at counselling, we can look at the support networks. Well, you tend to find all of a sudden they're in a situation or a dynamic, and what could happen is certain sequences could be replayed from their past. So again, it's bringing up a sort of different relational dynamics in the workplace where that person could be triggered by someone, not intentionally, but it's got a history to it. So again, you sort of there's this sort of trauma that's been reenacted. Also, the aspect of them not being able to ask for support as well. So it's like it becomes a minefield because can I say something to someone? No, I can't because when I was younger, there was no one to support me. So, I can't really reach out and ask for help. And maybe there's an expectancy from the employee that says the employer should see me. You should ask me, am I okay? So I think what happens is there's so many different things that get entwined from someone's past to also the sort of expectation that the employee should be able to do something. And when that need's not met, there's a sense of reaction. Or number B, the employee, in theory, should sort of look at the employers on a holistic perspective and say, right, this person has these skills. How can I develop those skills? And at the same time, there's those growth points. How can I support them to work through that? Because on one level, and this is my thinking, if a boss does that, that individual who may have neurodiverse issues or other trauma related issues will begin to work on what they haven't worked with previously and begin to sort of explore what they need to work with, but also stay longer in the job or put more energy into what they're doing as well because they're being seen. So I think there's different components that come in, which as a boss you wouldn't know about, but also as that individual who's suffered doesn't actually understand themselves unless they are identified with what they've gone through, but also the fear of seeking help is too much for them.
Yeah, and that could come out in aggression as well as, going back into their own skin and not wanting to say anything, couldn't it? So you might get a very young person who has felt like they need to be aggressive in these situations, fight or flight, and therefore that kind of comes out at any point where they feel at risk, and that risk could be risk neurologically, that they're going to be found out that they can't spell, or it might be culturally, or there might be a wide variety of reasons why they might respond in this kind of aggressive or passive way, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, an example I would give, when I was 24, 25, I got this wonderful job as a head chef for this hotel and sort of small chain of restaurants they wanted to build. And I got into this job, and all of a sudden the executive chef said, right, you need to basically do these little tostadas. We need to have a food tasting. And I froze. And he came and he goes, what have you been doing? And then all of a sudden he gave me a template and I was able to do it. Now, the reason why I mentioned the template to your parenting skills earlier on, if a child has a template and you keep doing it, you're building up a system for them to work with. And people with ADHD, ASD need a sort of routine or a template that they feel safe and secure in, and a routine that they can work with. So that's important. I never had that before. So he gave me a template, then I was able to get going and I did a good job. Now, the point being, when I had this wonderful job last year for the organization that I mentioned, I was taking lots of memory tablets, cognitive tablets to keep me functioning. So I can work. But it came to a point where I had this crisis just before COVID, where all of a sudden I went blank. Now I know when I write poetry or stories, it flows, and all of a sudden I hit a brick wall. So I was working 7 days a week, trying to get these reports done, and I could not get anything on the computer. So I had my handwritten notes, but I just couldn't do it. Now, you mentioned earlier on fight and flight and freeze. I suppose there was a pattern in my life where that happened, but I was unaware of it. So cognitively, going back to what I started with, oh yeah, I understand this now. Now I can get through it. But however, that trauma in me was still there, which I was blinded to. Because what I've done is push to get where I'm going, where I've been right now. So, okay, this is what it is. I want to get there. I'm going to get there. I'm going to fight. I'm going to get there. Then all of a sudden, it's like an elastic band or a bungee jump. You jump, and all of a sudden you go back up, ping. That's what it was like for me. But in the sense of, I froze. Now, all the support was coming in. Oh, what do you need? Can you do this? Yes, I can do it. No problems. Because the intention is to do it. You're 100% there to do it. However, you go to do it, and again, you might, in my experience, my mind went blank. So the intention is to do it, but the anxiety or the trauma holds you back. So I'm thinking at the time, it's my dyslexia, but I seem to have pushed through my life to get support. It was something else. Now, then I thought, have I got ADHD? Because I was sending clients to get assessed for ASD and ADHD. Maybe there is something there, and I got diagnosed. Then I thought, okay, so the issue is ADHD and my dyslexia. Fine, no problems. Let's try and work through it. But again, something's holding me back. Now, more than likely because of my past. I don't know if you heard of childhood adverse experiences. So we all go through them. Everyone has at least one or two. And in most cases, when we look at challenging young people or adults, they mostly have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So you're looking at drug addiction, challenging behaviour, more than likely gangs, etc., etc., etc. So I had a high level of that. So it was a combination of trauma, which even though I worked with cognitively, but something innately going back to you feeling anxious when you were a child doing maths, something that I didn't necessarily process at the time. So all of a sudden you've got a combination of different traumas, the dyslexia, why can't I be the same as other people? What is it with me? Am I stupid? Or parents saying you're stupid at the time. And also I'm not able to focus. Or I get too much information in that I can't hold it, or I have to, it comes out. And it's, I can't write down the information quick enough. So imagine that, going back to your question about someone in the office trying to fit in a box because they know that something's going on, but they can't quite understand it from a sort of emotional, traumatic experience, and also understanding it mentally, but there's a confusion, it's chaos. And so the reason why I mentioned it from my experience, that if a child has to go through those stages up to being an adult, oh my gosh. Yeah. Oh my gosh. So it can be quite heavy, but then we can see the challenges that people have, and maybe why so many people go off work sick because there's so much going on for them. And maybe, as I mentioned earlier, we talk about preverbal trauma. Now, I've been working with this client for 2 years now who was diagnosed in 2017 with ASD and ADHD. So the person went through the whole life studying, working, and having challenges with the parents. Now, the parents did the best that they could for the child because no one knew about ASD or ADHD at the time. Then all of a sudden, it's this crescendo moment where you see, or the work that I've actually done with this individual is to integrate the positive qualities of the ADHD and ASD. So again, it's about the integration of the working through the trauma, working through the attachment with the parents, and again, using the qualities of if I look at this person's ASD, being able to focus, pinpoint things, injustice, in working what they need to do, and then the information of the ADHD, I'm getting all this wonderful information coming in. How do I use it? So it's like funneling it, and what I described to the person, imagine your ADHD as the flag. It's going around, it's moving, it's windy. Then all of a sudden you need to come into that aspect of your ADHD, which can funnel the information and focus on one thing. So that's the way I've been working, looking at the ASD and ADHD as semi-autonomous parts of the individual. So, for example, you'll have the father, you're the CEO, you're the husband, you're the son, you're the radio presenter. So we all got different parts of ourselves. So the idea is we need to be able to understand how they work, because there's the extremities of each part of them. There's the rebel, there's the maverick, there's the anger, there's the rage. So understanding all those parts of us in a balanced way, and then working with the gift of the dyslexia, dyscalculia, the autism, the ADHD, X, Y, and Z, then we can work with it. But we need to be able to pull out the trauma from those parts from the past, then focus on those aspects of the neurodiverse challenges that the individual works, so they can use it in a positive way. Does that?
That's brilliant, Gary. And I love that. And I think that really brings it nicely, kind of that rounds it off nicely. And I think that example is a good one. And I loved it. Like I say, the trauma thing has got me thinking a lot more about me and my family, and people that I talk to, because I think I've probably not given that element enough attention. It's kind of, oh, stuff happened and here I am. How do I deal with it? but actually being able to think a little around why your exact point there, why sometimes I mentally freeze and cannot get over the line, and other times why I may get so much anxiety that I'd kick off, I'm not doing that or whatever, throw my dummy out the pram. It's being able to go, okay, well now I can follow those steps back to, okay, that there's reasons why that's happening, and maybe there is a point of where I can manage that. And I think for employees, that is an incredible bit of advice for people sat in organizations, offices now, who suffer from stress and anxiety, directly linked with a variety of things, but neurodiversity in this context. And that's really tangible for them and something that they can give consideration. And also for managers, when you're working with somebody, just to appreciate that, just to appreciate the fact that this journey, we've all gone on journeys, right? We've all got things, we've all got some levels of trauma. But for that moment, that you look at that person and think, why are they being so angry? Well, exactly. Why are they being so angry? And what can I do to maybe, help, basically, I think is what we should all be thinking about, especially given we've spent so much time now apart. We all want to come together, right, Gary?
Well, I think it's so important. I think many years ago, as I said to you, I'm sort of looking to get funding to open up this therapeutic centre, and really sort of to work with what I call a transpersonal positive psychology, and for businesses. If you can go into a business and you look at the difficulties they have, there are ways of working with that. And, my experience of working with either young people, and I'll give an example. I was working in a school in Southwest London with this resilience program I got, Superheroes Finding the Gifts. If you've given them an experience and you focus on their gifts, all of a sudden, I had children who were in their class, they act out. And they were doing, closing their eyes for 20 minutes. Not even a word. So holding that space for them. And, they were there every week because they felt something within themselves, okay, which is so important. It goes back to where I mentioned the soul, but in Winnicott's we would call the sort of authentic self, true self, hidden behind the traumas, yeah, or the survival self. Now, if you look at organizations, if they allow a space where you work with a group of people, and in my experience, what happens in that journey, it could be an hour and a half a week, or, for a period of time. As you said, they begin to see each other. They identify, hold on a minute, you may be the boss. However, there's a common ground, our trauma. Then what happens is that alleviates the sort of defense, the judgment. Then the healing works for that individual, but also the work scenario. Because in employees or employers, the employees look at the employers as unconsciously the parental figures. So you have a chain of events happening. Yeah. So there are things you can do in organizations to support that. Again, focusing on maybe what wasn't focused in that child's life because the parents didn't know. So it brings a natural healing. So I think, again, what you're saying is really important. But also, children teach us what we need to work on ourselves. And I think it's really, really important. Our frustration in our child is our frustration within ourselves sometimes. And my youngest daughter, she's fantastic because without her, she has anxiety issues. And I can look back to our birthing and stuff that went on early on, and she's spot on, but hypersensitive noise, stuff with noise. She has things in a routine. She likes things in a certain way. But what I found from her is she was able to give me this skill set to be there for parents and other children through those challenges. So I see her as a blessing. She could be a firework in the house, wants her own attention, and everything's got to be her way. And, sometimes you mentioned I've got angry. But what I've noticed through her, when I've got angry, she'd be, oh, why didn't you, Dad, sit down? I think you just need to take some time out. And it's funny, but what I've realized is what I say to her, or vice versa in the family, she's beginning to sort of digest and use it in the same way. So it goes back onto mirroring. Yeah, absolutely. And she'll hold me up. She could be angry with me. Absolutely. So we have this wonderful relationship, but she's given my gift of understanding, I would say she has traits definitely of ASD or ADHD. My wife would say no, she'd kill me if she hears this, but absolutely she has on some level. My other daughter, and I got her to see a therapist as well. So I'm a therapist, as you know. Yeah, my daughter needs help. Absolutely. My eldest daughter's a great poetry writer, reader, severe dyslexia. We got help straight away because obviously I've realised. And we focused on her gift. Yeah, you're great at writing stories. It doesn't matter about the spelling. You're great poetry. But giving that child love and understanding is the most important thing we could do as parents. I'm not perfect at all. And, I get things wrong. I'm evolving. And I think even if we look at that from a parental or as an employer perspective, we're not perfect. And I think if we can relate in that way, whatever the trauma or the issue is, we give space for that individual to heal, to work through whatever they're going through. But again, the best product is if they're happy and working well, the workplace is a good environment. And I know they're about profit, but you've got to get something that's special. Maybe they have a gift that hasn't been explored that can support the workforce, the workplace. So again, I think it's this cycle that what we put in, we get out. What we don't know, we ask. And again, it's about human relationship, how we connect. So I think it's really important that we explore each other, who we are, cross gender, religion, culture, creed. We need to be there with each other, listen. And we can't do something. Look, there's this person here, there's this organization, be open to it.
Brilliant. Gary, thank you so much. If people want to reach out to you and connect with you, how can they find you?
Well, I have two websites. So the one that I use with organisations is info at yc-dc.co.uk or Gary Barron at yc-dc.co.uk. And you can look at me on the website, which is www.yc-dc.co.uk or www.gbcounselling.co.uk.
Perfect. And LinkedIn, they can find you there too?
They can. I'm really terrible at that. I need to change my LinkedIn page. Maybe you'll have it, but yeah, I need to update and put. You can find me on LinkedIn. Just look for Gary Barron, I think. So yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I'll put some links in the podcast content as well, so people will be able to find it there. Gary, absolute pleasure having you on. You've been awesome, which I expected. Really, thank you so much. That was very insightful and enjoyable.
Yeah. No, thank you for having me on. Look, the work that you're doing, I think, is phenomenal. It's needed. You have a great personality. Presence about you. The first time we met, absolutely, and whatever I can do to support your organisation as well. I'll be there. Maybe we could do some workshops together. That'd be fun.
Love it. Thanks very much.